Well, hello folks. It's been a while since I've posted a video, and I know a number of folks are wondering what's the story. There's no mystery to it. I've simply been busy. I do have a lot of video footage shot for various projects in the last 6 or 8 months. I just haven't got around to editing it and making something reasonably understandable out of the raw footage. It's not that I haven't been engaged or busy. I have been, but life sometimes gets in the way of these extracurricular activities, which this is for me. It is not my day job. And rest assured, I will be getting some videos back online in the coming weeks and months. And this is just, I thought I'd do, excuse me, a little video talking about a couple of the projects I've been working on. I'm not going to show video of those projects right now, with one exception. But I've been working on a Honda S90. I've just about finished up on the TS185. In fact, it is done. I'm just waiting for the meters to come back from being rebuilt. I've got a Kawasaki 1972 G5 100 up on the stand right now. And the primary focus of this particular video is going to be showing you the process of reconditioning a Stator on a 1971 Kawasaki F5 350 Enduro. I picked the 350 Enduro up a few months back from a good friend of mine, Chuck, and he knew I was looking for a 350 Kawasaki Enduro, an F5 or an F9. He found this for me, and it's in very good shape for its age. It's all original, but it needed a little electrical work. And what I'm going to talk through on this video, this isn't really a how-to video. I'm just going to show you some of the steps that I went through, or I'm going to go through, I haven't done it yet, to recondition a Stator, because it did not have reliable spark when I got the bike, and that was a known condition. I wasn't surprised by that, but I did get spark. I have not started the bike, but I did get spark, solid blue spark now, and I've already done some work to the Stator, and now I'm going to go ahead and clean up the wiring loom a little bit and show you that process. There's the Kawasaki F5. Again, it's a 1971 model. It's a 350. You can see I've got some pieces off of it because I've been working on it a bit on the side. I've had to order a few items here and there, and if you pay particular attention here, the Stator right there, left side of the engine is off. I had to pull it off to figure out why I wasn't getting spark. I had traced it back through using some electrical testing methods to determine that the Stator was in fact not functioning correctly. Fortunately, when I bought the bike, it came with a box of 2 other spare Stators. So apparently one of the previous owners was having some electrical problem. I don't think he ever got to the bottom of it, either lost interest or moved on, and I ended up with a bike a number of years down the road. Obviously, I don't think this is run. I think Chuck told me the last he knew it ran was around 1990. So it's been what, 26 years, I believe, if my math is correct. So I got Stator off, and that's going to be the topic primarily of the work that I'm going to do for this video. But again, you can see the bike. It's pretty much original. It's not 100% perfect, but it is a 1971 after all, and it is a survivor. I am not intending to restore this bike. I'm going to recondition it. I'm going to probably end up repainting the exhaust system, because you can see in the photo there, or in the video there, that right here, someone has painted that with silver paint, that header on the exhaust system. I'm going to replace the knobby on the rear wheel. You can see that somebody put a big knobby on it, which I do not care for. Not for my projects. I restore them or work on bikes, put them back to original condition, so I'll track down a trials type tire for this bike. Shocks are not original, so I'll have to sort that out and try to find something closer to original. And there's just a number of other odds and ends that I'm going to have to go through on the bike. You can see somebody drilled some holes in the fender. I'm going to get rid of that fender brace in the front there. For my purposes, that won't be necessary, etc., etc. So that's just a little overview of the project. We'll move on here in a minute to starting to recondition the wiring loom on the stator that I'll be putting back on this bike. Assembly that was mounted on the Kawasaki F5 when I got it. I don't think it's probably the original, and it's the best actually of the three that I got with the bike. The two others are in very rough shape. This one, as I indicated earlier, didn't have spark, or not reliable spark. It had a very weak intermittent spark, and I did some testing following the Kawasaki service manual, and what I discovered is the bottom, this is the lighting coil for the lights, the physical lights on the bike. That's what this is on the left here. Over here on this side, if I can see if I can get a decent shot of that, you've got really two separate coils, two smaller coils. The bottom one here, which is a little bit larger of the two, is the exciter coil. This bike has a CDI ignition, by the way. There are no points. And this top coil is the signal coil right here. That works, these two work in concert with the CDI. In fact, they trigger the CDI to create the spark through the coil, the ignition coil. And what I did is replace these two off of one of the other stators that I did some testing, and discovered that on this unit, the bottom coil here, the exciter coil, was defective. So I had to desolder here, desolder this on both the original stator assembly, and then take those two coils and move them over here and put it all back together. And I soldered it here, and that's just black liquid electrical tape is all that is right here, and put it back together. You can see on the back how it's held together. This, by the way, this green, light green wire that you see right here, is for the neutral switch, and that ties into the neutral switch. So I actually put this temporarily back on the bike and tested it. I tested it electrically before I put it back on the bike, and I got good indications on everything. Put it back on the bike temporarily, and I have nice blue hot spark now. So some of these parts can be very hard to find. One might ask, why didn't you use new ones? Well, they're very hard to find, and when you do find them, they're very, very expensive. And since I think it'll be fine, the epoxy covering seems to be fine. It's not chipped. It's not. They haven't been overheated. You can see I cleaned them up a little bit here. Cleaned this up a little bit. Everything seems to be reasonably intact. Now, realistically, could this fail next week? Sure. And if it does, I will deal with that when the time comes. But I think it'll be fine. The real focus of this video, though, isn't to talk about that, but I'm going to replace this Loom cover. This vinyl, you can see here, is very stiff. In fact, it's already cracked, which I just got to tell you, I just can't deal with that. So I'm going to replace this, and I temporarily put some black electrical tape around here. This black cover will be replaced all the way back to here. I'm going to clean the wiring up really well. And then in order to facilitate that, I have two options. I can either remove and break the connections here where it's all soldered together, or I can do it here at the ends. So I've decided not to do it here. I just don't want to mess around here. This is nice and intact, and most of it's original except for what I just did. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take these ends off. They're all hard, they're brittle, and I'm literally going to snip these off, and I'm going to replace them with new pieces out of a kit that I have. I get these items from Vintage Connections, by the way. I can replace all of these components with brand new that will look and perform just like OEM. So I will one by one replace each of these. I'll cut them off, including, by the way, this triple plug here. I have a replacement kit, also from Vintage Connections, that has an exact match to the original. So I will cut these ends off, replace the tubing, the vinyl sleeve, then replace the ends, and then put it back on the bike. In terms of the vinyl tubing, you can buy this in different sizes, which I keep this around. I keep, I think, pretty much every available common size. I actually have have a drawer to keep this in. And this is, I believe, 8mm, and I think this is 10 if I recall. Two different sizes. Plus I have, I think, 6, 7, and 11.5 or 12. I'm guessing, just by eyeballing it, that probably the 8mm is the closest match, or probably what is a match for the original tubing, as you see here. So I will use this tubing and this kit of parts here and these parts here and replace the sleeves. And when it's done from here back, it'll look almost like brand new wiring. Shortening the cable up, by the way, the minuscule amount I'm going to for this project by cutting this here really is irrelevant. There's plenty of length here in this harness as it fits on the bike. I have plenty to work with. It's not a concern. There's something you would want to check on, of course, if you've got a very tight loom, that you understand what you're getting into and aren't disappointed and become frustrated later on. But I already checked that, so I know this will be fine. Really, the first step in performing this kind of work is obviously the connectors on the ends here are generally the same in most cases, right? We've got 3 female bullet connectors right here. That's in the upper side. I've got 1 male bullet connector, and that's for the neutral switch wire. And then I have a double female bullet connector, and then I have the 3-prong, 2 female, 1 male plug. So you need to pay attention, because actually I won't replace these on both sides, with the possible exception of this connector, which goes to the CDI unit, by the way. I might end up replacing and putting the companion piece, because I have both the male and female here. See this? I might end up replacing both the male and the female sides of this, so the CDI I would clip, and I would do the same thing I'm going to do here. But my point being is you need to pay attention and document what you have here. Now, what I usually do, I will take detailed photos of the wire so I can get the color. So it's just, this is a white with a green stripe, and I'll take a photo of that, and then I'll do the next one. Photo of that. I'll clean it up a little, make sure I get a good quality photo. This is a solid yellow. Get a photo of that. So because I have to take them all off at once in order to get the sleeve off and the new sleeve on. So, and there's going to be a gap in time here. So I have to be very deliberate and make sure I take my time. You have to be patient and take your time with these things and document as you go, because I will assure you that if it's days, even hours, but certainly if it gets to be days, or in some cases for me it could even be weeks if I get distracted on another project, before you get back to it, you will not remember. You will not recall. You will, even if you've got 2 or 3, if you had 2 of these and 1 of these that looks something like that, chances are excellent days or weeks down the road, you will not remember what those, whether it was a male or a female and which was which. You have to document as you go. I can't overemphasize that enough, especially if you're working on multiple projects spread out over time like I am. I don't even attempt to remember this. Even if it's going to be just a few hours and I have to take a break to go get something to eat in the house or whatever, even in those situations, I will take a picture of it with my camera, and I'm not taking any chances. Otherwise, I need to go back to the service manual. I have to get online. You have to try to look it up, and then get frustrated, or you try to find the other companion piece that matches up to it on the bike somewhere. Just not worth the effort. So, first step will be to document that. I'm not going to video record that because that's very straightforward, and then we'll pick up the video a little bit later on. So how I'm going to clean this before I do anything further and start the documentation, I'm going to take this contact cleaner, which is a plastic safe contact cleaner, and I think I've spoken to this before in other videos. There's other ways you can clean this: hot soap and water. Just make sure you dry it well. You could use acetone, for instance, which would work very well. The only concern I have with acetone is the fact that any sheen on the or gloss that you might have in the wiring, it'll strip it off and make it a very matte or flat finish. Not a big deal for a project such as this, but if it was something that was a restoration or something that's going to show, I'd probably be concerned about that. I simply use contact cleaner because I know it's safe and it's easy to use. Not rocket science. Basically, I'm going to hose this down a bit. Then I'm going to take just an old toothbrush and I'm going to scrub it, start getting it clean, work it down. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it at this stage, but I just want to get the wiring cleaned up a bit so that when I document each wire in each type of connector, I got a nice, clean, sharp photo that will come through. One thing about this this cleaner, this contact cleaner, is it evaporates very, very quickly, which is generally a preferred condition. When you're doing something like this, it's not necessarily a preferred condition, but it's just part of the deal. I'm not going to worry about the bullet connectors because they're going to be removed anyway. So I'm more concerned right now about getting the wiring itself cleaned up, getting some of that oil and grease that's accumulated over, well, it's actually well over 40 years now, because this is a 1971, so we're pushing 45 years now, obviously. And you can see how it kind of cleans it up, right? Again, I'll do it again when I get it all apart. Right now it's just to generally make it look decent for the photos. You notice I'm also wearing gloves, and the reason being, it should be obvious, but just restate it. These cleaners are quite harsh, and they will strip the oils right out of your hands, dry your skin out, and besides that, I don't think most of us want to be absorbing these chemicals into our system through our skin. At least I don't. I can't speak for everyone on the video, but since I work with so many different projects and chemicals and such, I think being prudent and cautious is the appropriate thing to do for your long-term health and well-being. You notice I put a cloth down here, just a piece of paper towel, which I keep. I use a lot of paper towel in the shop. I'm not a huge fan of shop rags, cloth shop rags. I do have a couple of buckets of them that are clean. And I do use them from time to time for certain things, but I tend to use more of just plain old, good quality paper towels that I allow to dry out. Any of the solvents such as this evaporate, and then I just dispose of them. So you can see that's kind of it right there. Just want to make sure that they allow me to create decent photos of the wiring. So what I will do now, put that aside, is I will flip this paper towel over, and then I will document each wire, and I'll turn it where I can see the color of the wiring itself. For instance, this one here is a green stripe on a yellow wire, and I'll position it something like this with a white background, take a good photo of it, check the photo, make sure I'm satisfied, move on to the next. Once I got all of those done, then I'll just snip all these ends off, have the record on my camera, pull the sleeve off, and get on with the end replacement. Alright, I've got decent photos of each one of these, as well as the collective loom, spread out something like that. And I saved them to my computer so I have a backup. Now, essentially all I'm going to do is take each one of these wires, see if I can get that out of the way like that, right up against this, where it was originally heat sealed. That's what these little ears are. They apparently have some kind of fixture when these looms are made, and they do with a heat activated kind of unit to seal them. So I'm basically just going to take each one of these and just simply cut it off with a nice decent set of side covers. And you notice I cut them all in about the same place. Again, you don't have to be overly concerned about all these details, frankly. I'm going to cut each one of these, and again, I took particular care here with this 3-wire male-female triplicate plug to make sure I got the right wire going the right way. One other thing that you can note, of course, don't throw these away, because if for some reason your photos didn't come through, whatever, you can use this blue here. In this case, I think it's blue and white. You can use the evidence of where it was connected before to guide you back as to what type of end goes on what wire. In this case, you can also see the red and white. There's a blue and a black. In fact, I might be able to get a close-up of this. See how I can do here. This black wire right here is right where my thumb is. I don't know if that comes through, but is actually frayed right there, and it's bare. So that one way or the other, that should actually be fixed. You might also notice on this triplicate plug with the blue, black, and red and white stripe that it's got a little piece of vinyl tubing here as well. See if I can't replace that also. I don't know if I got vinyl tubing that small. I might have to use a little piece of heat shrink tubing or something like that instead, which they might have actually even used here, I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm going to do the same thing here that I did with the other wires, and that is I'm going to clip each of these off right at the plug. That one didn't cut clean. There we go. So again, I'm just going to set these originals aside. Eventually they'll get thrown away. They're of no use. These get very hard. This isn't too bad, but these are totally worthless. So my next step will be to remove this grommet, which goes into the engine case to locate the wiring when it's installed. I'll pull this off. I'll remove this sheathing here, this vinyl tubing. Clean from here down. I'll take my time and clean all the wiring. It's probably inside here. It's probably reasonably clean, except where it started to crack, as you can see probably here. I don't know how well that will show on the video, but you can see it's been exposed to the elements for a while, so it's kind of oily. I'll clean that all up, and then I'll put the new sheathing on first. Obviously, the sheathing has to go on before these go on, because you'll never get the ends through this tubing. So I've got the sheathing slit. I couldn't pull it off, which is pretty common. It gets hard and it isn't flexible and it's tight. So I have a pair of scissors here that I use for this purpose, and I just rounded the end off here and then filed it a bit. Did that some time ago. And then I basically just take the scissors, slip it up underneath, and careful not to cut the wiring obviously underneath, and just slit. And sometimes you can slide it like you would paper. Other times you've got to kind of work your way around. Take your time, because again, you don't want to damage the wiring underneath. And I have not taken this off yet, so this is literally the way I stopped, and I wanted to get a shot of this. And you'll see why I've got to clean the wiring inside. Well, I will clean the wiring. I suppose you don't absolutely have to, but you can see there's oil. You can see all the oil here. This section here is down in the engine, attached near the engine block. So you got chain oil and road debris and road oil. You can see it all got up underneath in there. See how brittle that is. And you can see how dirty it is. It actually came apart in two sections. You can see how oily and dirty, especially down in here. A little less dirty as we get closer to the top here, but I'm going to clean this all out really good. In good conscience, I can't put this back together the way it is. And it'll allow me to just double check the wiring. I'm pretty confident the wiring itself is okay. Just want to make sure it's good and clean. Okay, we've got the wiring pretty well cleaned up. I cleaned it all the way from back at the stator itself, back here, all the way around. I used the contact cleaner, an old toothbrush that we talked about before. I did wear gloves when I did it, got it all degreased and cleaned. You'll notice that I bundled the independent wires that take the bolt style connectors from the wires that go into the three connector unit here. So I've separated them so I could clean them and bundle these up so I didn't have to worry about knowing which is which later. Wiring was in good shape. generally speaking. I did notice one thing on the yellow with the green stripe wire here. There's a little bit of abrasion that had occurred in here. It wasn't really through the insulation, but I just went ahead and put a clear piece of heat shrink tubing over it, heated it and shrunk it down, and then of course a bullet connector will go on the end. That was just precautionary. Other than that, the wiring was in very good shape outside of being very dirty. I cleaned back in here very well. I cleaned the neutral indicator wire also, and it's pretty clean right now. So my next step will be to put the replacement vinyl tubing. Let me get that over here. My next step will be to use the replacement vinyl tubing and re-sleeve it, and then I'll have to put the grommet back on. That just slips over the tubing itself, something like that. I use a little silicone to make it easier to slide through. I'm not concerned about that. And once I've got that on, then I can go ahead and put the end pieces back on. I thought I'd just show a bit of the in-process step of re-sleeving here. I cut a piece of 8mm, that's inside diameter by the way, vinyl sleeve to approximate length. I used this, the original, as best I could, and just eyeballed it. I use a silicone tune-up grease, dielectric tune-up grease, to lubricate each individual strand. And I just take a little bit, put it on my fingers like this, and coat the wire with it like that, make it slippery. And I do it starting with the very first piece because it gets tighter and tighter in this sleeve as you put more and more wires through. You can see I've already got about 4 or 5 of them in here. This is the opposite end, obviously. The ones with the blue tape are the 3 that go in to this triple connector. And I did those first. And I just lightly lubricate the wire like that. Put a big loop in it. Again, this isn't terribly difficult. And I just slide it through the sleeving until it comes out the other end. The further into this you get, and the more wires you will put in, the more difficult it becomes, frankly. And that's why you lubricate all the wires so that they get in here. All the wires have silicone grease on them, and it'll make it easier as you get to the last 1 or 2 where it gets a little bit tighter. But that's really the gist of the process. So I've just completed relooming or re-sleeving the wiring. It wasn't particularly difficult. The very last wire I'd pulled through, I had to work a little bit, but again, I lubricated everything with the silicone grease. It's dielectric, so it doesn't carry current. One thing I did different than the original, the sleeving didn't come up through this clamp here. It stopped just short of it. I went ahead and brought it all the way through. So I loosened this up, expanded the clamp, brought the sleeve through and reclamped it. And then at the other end, it's, I think, approximately where it was before. Okay, you can see here I have the 3-prong connector done. I've got the little piece of heat shrink tubing over here just to bundle this together. That's the way it was essentially done originally. And then I just pulled the 3 separate wires up using the original plug here as a model. Make sure I got them in the right spot. So you can see, I think you can see that. It essentially duplicates exactly the original. It looks like new, and that's actually the intention, of course. My next step then is I'm going to move into, and I will demonstrate this here in a moment, is putting on the bullet connectors on the various wires. There's 2 different styles. There's the female. This is the sleeve in my left hand, and the right is actually the female bullet connector. And then of course I think there's one male version that goes in the wiring system. Again, the small sleeve, or the insulators in my left hand, and the bullet connectors in the right. So what I'm going to do now is show you, I'll just demonstrate on one wire. I'm not going to show them all because it's really repetitious how to do this. Now, you use a unique or specialized crimper, which you can see here. This is not your common spade connector that you buy at a hardware or auto supply and you just crimp those colored connectors with. This is a ratcheting style. It's got jaws in here that are designed to receive specifically this style of connector, this OEM style connector, and it ratchets. So as you tighten it, you can hear it clicking, and it holds position until you reach full compression, and then it releases. And you can buy these. Vintage Connection sells them. That's where I typically buy most of these kind of items, these connectors and supplies. Vintage Connections in, I think it's California. Good supplier, by the way. They are good people to do business with. Dell's a great guy. So you need this particular type of ratcheting crimping tool. Don't use one of those common bullet connectors, or crimpers, rather. To prepare for this, there's just a couple things you need to do. Number one is regarding the connector itself. And again, this is the female, so it will take when it's assembled in the bike, it'll go like, you have a male on one side and a female on the other. These little tabs right here, I'm just going to push them in a little bit with my finger because the wire is going to lay up in here something like that, and you're going to crimp it together. I'm going to do the yellow wire here. It's a little larger wire. I think it's probably for the charging system without looking at diagram. You can see I put a little black mark on there. That's just to visually assist for this video for the viewers. That's where I'm going to strip off the end. That's probably 3/8 of an inch, maybe 1/4 of an inch, because that has to be stripped off so when I crimp it, it'll get a mechanical bond in there, and we'll demonstrate that in just a moment. First thing I need to do is slide this sleeve on first before I put the connector on, because once you put the connector on, though I have done it, I have made the mistake of forgetting and putting the connector on first, and then either you have to cut it off and do it again or finagle this over it, and I've done it, but it's much easier. Just don't forget it to begin with. The next thing I'm going to do here is strip off, starting at that mark right there with just a stripper. I'm going to strip that off. So you can see I got the wire stripped off the end, about where my mark was. And what I will do then is take this bullet connector, the female, which matches the original that came off here. I will take that. I'll demonstrate this in a second, but essentially this is going to go like that and be crimped into place. And then the sleeve will be slid up over it. So in order to do that, given the size of this wire and bullet connector, what I'm going to do is put, I know from experience that this connector will go in the middle jaw, and I will get it started like that. You can see. Okay? Up here, simply we'll take the wire, make sure I don't have any stray wires